Tequila is the hottest spirit on the market today. And every day it feels like a new tequila brand is being introduced into the market. With so much money flowing into the tequila industry, a lot of brands look to cut corners, find ways of making their brands cheaper so they can make as much money as possible. But despite this, there are some brands that are still making tequila in the pure and honest way. But how exactly is tequila made? Recently, I went down to Mexico and got to see the entire process from field to bottle of how tequila is actually produced. I got to speak to some jimadors about their job and this way of life, and I even got to witness a man make some incredible tequila in his backyard in the middle of the jungle. I have a lot of love for tequila and agave spirits. Obviously, it's what I post about the most on this channel. And what has always been so fascinating to me is just how long it takes to make this spirit, how difficult and backbreaking it can be, and just how much culture and heritage it has. It isn't just a product that you can buy at a store, and it is in fact a way of life for a lot of the people who make this amazing spirit. But that doesn't mean it's easy. So the first stop was Cazcanes Distillery.
To make good tequila, you need to have good agave, good water, and good master distillers.
Yeah.
In our case.
And Don Chico is that master distiller.
Yo haciendo tequila tengo como, desde que inicié en esto, yo tengo 43 años. Yo inicié trabajando en esto llegué trabajando desde abajo.
¿Oh, sí?
Sí. Yo llegué rajando agave, cargando agave, moliendo agave. A mí me gustó muchísimo. Mucho. Mi trabajo, el llegar a donde yo trabajaba, me daba emoción llegar a hacer mi trabajo, mover aparatos, prender calderas, prender alambiques, checar el tequila todo el tiempo. Es un trabajo, cuando empieza uno es un trabajo muy duro. Sí. El rajar, el cargar, el moler, es un trabajo muy duro. Si algo sale mal, el tequila sale malo y no debe ser así. Tenemos que sacar un buen tequila. Sí.
Getting to speak to Don Chico, someone who has lived and breathed this way of life for over 43 years, was incredibly eye-opening and insightful, but it didn't quite explain how this incredible spirit is actually made. And so it all starts out with the agave plant, specifically the blue Weber species of agave. This is the huge bluish/green plant that is everywhere throughout the countryside in Jalisco, and it is used to make tequila. This plant takes anywhere between 6 to 8 years to reach full maturity before you are able to harvest it. A lot of brands will harvest the agave younger because they don't want to wait that long, but if they aren't fully mature, the sugars have not had enough time to develop and the product will not taste right. See the little baby ones that aren't that big, and then the bigger ones in the background. And here's me standing next to some fully matured agave. These fuckers are real tall, and the leaves are very sharp. And so to harvest this and turn it into tequila, we need something called a koa, which is a big, sharp, circle-looking knife thing on a stick, and a jimador, which is a strong-looking stoic man with a muscular brow to use that koa. He uses it to cut the agave out of the ground, separating it from its roots, and he then cuts off all of the sharp leaves or pencas, leaving just the heart of the agave or the piña. They then cut it in half and remove what's called the cogollo. And this is important because, as Jose explained to us,
the cogollo gives it a bitterness to the product. Big facilities will use it because it's, you're losing weight, you're losing piña, you're losing sugar, so the yield is not as good as if you put the whole piña inside. Any good quality tequila that you'll find in the market, which are out there, will take the cogollo out.
And this little detail about the cogollo showed me that there's so much more that goes into this process than I initially thought. And no matter how effortless this dude makes it look, it is excruciatingly difficult to do this. I struggled heavily to get it right. And I needed to know more, so I got to speak to the jimador supervisor about this super labor-intensive job.
¿Y cómo es un día típico del jimador? Pues es un trabajo muy cansado, muy rudo, entonces ellos aprovechan la mañana, lo más fresco, porque para las 2, 3 es un calor. Nos levantamos aproximadamente a las 2 de la mañana para salir aquí del pueblo a las 3. Entonces el desgaste y luego a veces se quedan sin agua. De repente que hace mucho calor, entonces más agua. Y ya hay en ocasiones que sí se han quedado sin agua. Igual nosotros los apoyamos, les llevamos, claro.
Sí.
Muy
Y en un día, un jimador puede jimar ¿cuántos?
Aproximadamente 500 agaves.
Unos 500.
500 cada uno, más o menos.
Para cada jimador.
En el agave tengo desde pequeño. Nosotros de hecho cosechamos, mi familia.
Wow.
Tenemos campos de agave también. Entonces yo desde chico estoy en esto del agave. 6 años aproximadamente.
Wow.
En cuanto pude trabajar. 6, 7 años, más o menos. Para mí, ¿qué significa el tequila?
Sí.
No, pues es para mí, la verdad, como la raíz. La raíz porque, de hecho, estamos en el pueblo donde el tequila es uno de los principales motores de trabajo, se puede decir. Porque el agave es lo que nos identifica aquí.
Oh, sí.
O sea, es pasión. Es pasión
Sí.
por el campo más que nada. Ver crecer, desarrollar. Y al último, saber que de nuestros mismos campos sale el tequila. Entonces, sí, es una satisfacción. Bueno.
Safe to say, this is not for the faint of heart, but it is a way of life for them. But let's take a second here. Notice how the inside of the agave plant is completely solid? How are they supposed to make a liquid out of that and then turn it alcoholic? Well, for that, they need to cook it first. So it's at this point, the agave piñas get loaded into trucks and taken to a distillery before they can be cooked. And you can cook agave in a few different methods, but the two of the most common is either an autoclave, which is this big round drum-looking thing that Cazcanes and the team at T-Tap uses. It's essentially like a pressure cooker. So if you've ever used a pressure cooker at home, that's kind of what this is. Or you can cook it in a brick oven. Cooking transforms the agave's natural starches and carbohydrates into simple fermentable sugar. And agave, once it's cooked, looks like this and gives off a very particular aroma. It has a slightly sweet taste, and it is earthy and vegetal. And so then after the agave has been cooked, it needs to be crushed or shredded and then mixed with water. The agave can be crushed by a tahona, which is a giant stone wheel, or it can be shredded by a machine like this. And then it gets water added to it, which will then extract the sugars, and it'll turn into a deep brown color. And the source of this water is incredibly important, which is why Cazcanes brings their water from over an hour and a half away.
The second and most important part in the tequila is the water. So we truck in our water for the fermentation process. It's a natural spring water from a town called Tequila, Jalisco, a spring. And you would wonder why from there, because I'm from that town. We just love the water and do have some connections over there, so it was easier for us to be able to truck in our water.
And we actually got to go and see the spring, which is their water source in Jose's hometown, and it's nestled beautifully in the mountains. Unfortunately, we couldn't go down to the stream, but luckily we did have Jack and his incredible drone skills to get this amazing shot.
This is where we actually get our water. That's our water truck. This is where we actually fill it. But there's a pipe that's going down to the actual spring down in the canyon here, and it gets pumped up here. We can't get that truck down into that canyon, and it's a mission.
The reason water is so important is because it is one of the only main differentiators when creating the flavor profiles for a tequila. Despite what you might think, not all water tastes the same, and different sources will have different flavors. So the source of water is one of the few ways that tequila producers can create a unique flavor profile that is distinct and special to them. So this is the water directly from the spring. Very good. A little minerally. That's tasty. I like that a lot. And using this special source of water that is from Jose's hometown not only gives their tequila a distinct flavor, it also helps and provides income to the town of Osto.
We pay for the water, and on top of that, we've been
Giving back to the community.
Giving back to the community.
We sponsor like every sports team in town. So soccer, football.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Give back. Like the water in the town is part of our DNA.
Totally. Yeah.
exactly.
Anything.
And so back to actual tequila production. Next, the shredded agave fibers and water get separated, and the now brown agave sugar water gets carried into fermentation tanks where yeast is introduced, and it will ferment for several days, starting to create alcohol. Eventually, this fermented agave sugar water will then make its way into these stills, where they get distilled and turned into tequila. Tequila is distilled twice before it is then bottled and labeled. But you might be thinking, Louis, what about the brown aged tequilas? Well, if they want to age it, they then need to put it into these barrels and put it into a nice cool room where they will let them hang out for a little bit, they'll chill out and gain some of that color and flavor from those barrels. And this is all done in a very controlled distillery, but that's not the only place that tequila is made, even if it can't legally be called that. This is Don Humberto. He makes a tequila distillate in the middle of absolutely nowhere in his backyard. You literally need to drive through the jungle to get here.
So guys, this is the Humberto, famoso Humberto.
Famoso Humberto.
Basically, Humberto is like a big part of the Cazcanes history. This is the master distiller where we got our formulation for the original Cazcanes recipe. Humberto, and this is his home. This is where it all began.
And this is where Don Humberto lives. It's nestled in a valley in the jungle with just a couple of families in this one small complex living right next to one another. And this is where Don Humberto cooks his agave. And while it may look like an horno, it is actually an autoclave. So he cooks his agave at low pressure in the autoclave. And then once the agave is cooked, they actually load it up onto this truck and chop it up a little bit before they drive it over about 10 feet to put it into their shredder. Oh, and his shredder isn't powered by electricity or anything like that. No, it is a badass 1970s Chevy engine that they have to use gasoline and shift into gear before it even starts working. They then put the chopped agave parts into the shredder and it throws it right up against a wall, where they then use this big old fork looking thing to put the fibers in a large bathtub. They then add water to this tub and introduce the fibers to the water. And so this is done by hand and not like a machine like in the distillery, so they really need to move it around and really integrate that agave with the water. He sometimes even lets dumb influencers like me move the fibers around and pretend to be helping just for the content. And then after that, they will remove the agave fibers from the water and move the water into these fermentation tanks where they'll ferment for a couple of days before Don Humberto will use his awesome wood-fired still to distill this twice to turn it into an incredible agave distillate. It'll then start to drip out right into this barrel where you can even grab some yourself and taste it. Well, not you because you're not there, but I did, and it was really good. It was some of the best damn agave distillate I have ever had in my life.